Hello, ladies and gentle dudes. I'm coming to you by postcard. How's it doing? Anyway, I'm sharing a very interesting book I'm reading. I can't put it down. I'm almost halfway through it. It doesn't have page numbers, so I don't know what page I'm on. But it's about yay thick, so I'm about halfway into it. Anyway, the book is supposedly written by the guy who supposedly replaced Paul McCartney in 1966. I'm going to research it more, but so far it seems very convincing. So I have to go dig deeper on into the rabbit hole. Whoops, my hat's on sideways here. Okay, but anyway, this guy, Billy's Back. It's called Billy's Back. It is actually encoded by Thomas E. Harriet. I can't pronounce his name, but he calls himself the encoder, not the author. So it's actually selections from the book that set world records, whatever that means. It says world record here, but it doesn't say what world record. It's the memoir of Billy Shears. So he took out some of the chapters because it's a lot longer book, and he goes through the chapters. I'll tell you which ones I've read and a little bit about them. I'm going to go more deeply into this, and I'm going to reread it again, and I'm going to do some thorough study of this, because if this is not one of the coolest conspiracy theory books I've ever seen, it's up there with them. So the first chapter is called Dreams of Paul. So it talks about Paul McCartney had a bunch of dreams. I guess I don't know exact when, but before he supposedly died on September 11th. I keep fucking with my hat. It's like a green beret now. Anyway, he had dreams about he was going to die. So he kept telling everyone he needs a replacement because he's going to die, and he was telling his family and everyone. And finally, he even had a look-alike contest, and all the people that did the look-alike contest he didn't really like. But then they found this guy who was named Pepper, Billy Pepper, otherwise known as Billy Shears, otherwise known as Billy Shepard. And he was in a band. He was in many bands. And his stage name in the band was Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. And so the song, Sgt. Pepper's, he was also nicknamed Sgt. Pepper. And so in the song Sgt. Pepper, which is right after supposedly the next album after the Revolver, which the reason they called it Revolver is they were revolving from what they called the second stage in this, what they call in this book anyway, the second stage of the Beatles into the third stage, which was when they replaced Paul McCartney with this guy. So anyway, that's the first chapter, is about the dreams he has about he's going to die. And then the next one is, what is it? Stewart was the first martyr. It talks about their first drummer, Stu, who died of a brain hemorrhage right after he left the Beatles, right before they got really famous. And they had another drummer, and then the management of the first record they made said they didn't like that drummer, so they put in a Ringo. Okay. The next chapter is called Paul Worked It Out. Paul's Girls is the fourth chapter, and then Drive My Car Backwards. I'm not going to go into each chapter totally thoroughly. The one that they left out is chapter 6, Let It Be, and he kind of hints to why he left it out, and it's going to be, you have to actually go to reading the memoirs of Billy Shear to find that chapter. But the cool thing about this version of the memoirs is each page has encodings, which supposedly in the real memoir of Billy Shears, it doesn't have them highlighted, so you can't really see, and he finds them. So as for an example here, throughout the book there's all these other messages. You can't see with this light on. It's too bright, that's why. Okay. That's way too bright. Okay. Let's try to go down a little. You can't see. Oh, you can a little bit here. So throughout the book, he has all these little highlighted parts where if you read down, it actually gives a totally different message, or a subcurrent message to the actual chapter, which kind of contradicts a lot of what it said, to kind of give you, like, are you sure you know what he's really saying? So for example, this one, it says, from needing Linda, I used the driving image to see my severe loneliness driving me sad. But the entire song is on driving in the rain. Then, of course, there is a car with a babe who has passed away. So he's talking about songs that he wrote in the Peppercorn days, and then songs he wrote later under the name McCartney. And he has similar lyrics in a lot of these ones and similar messages. So it would be kind of a weird coincidence that a guy who wasn't in the band supposedly, and then became in the and he says he became part of the band. Could you guys read it better like that? Yeah, when I put the light away. No, it's too bright. Okay, anyway. I'll bring that light back down. Whoa, very bright. Okay, so anyway, there's so much, it goes so deep, I'm going to have to make more videos of this and more explanation of each chapter, but let me just try to go by memory. He's talking about the song, so many, Baby If You Drive My Car, Yes I'm Gonna Be a Star, Baby I Love You. Actually, there's so many songs that they reference in here and the lyrics to what they really meant and what you thought they meant. And if you go back and listen to some of the lyrics, they actually overdubbed the actual words that they wanted, but the first time they ever put lyrics on an album was a Beatles album called Sgt. Pepper, where they explained why Paul died and how he died. But they didn't want to put it out there because they wanted to subconsciously put it out there just because they didn't want to say they ever lied about it. According to the author of this book, whoever that is, if it's really Billy Shears or it's something else, I don't know. But anyway, okay, so let's go into some of the songs. It talks about the whole. Let's see some of the other chapters if I can that'll kind of just naming the chapter will kind of remind me some of the things I read, because I read it very fast, and I want to go back and read this again because it's a really good book. Okay, so one of the where's the chapters? Okay, here we are. Burn a Poor Young Country Boy. So this guy who became Paul McCartney in '66, according to this book, was a country boy. He wasn't from Liverpool. He had to fake the Liverpool accent. But he was in many bands where he always used fake names. So Billy Shears actually isn't his real name, but that was his name in one of the bands that he was before he became part of the Beatles. So he used that in the Sgt. Pepper to talk about who he is. But he doesn't say yet who he is, and so far what I've got to. He says, I'm a shepherd. Yes. And shepherd, if you take out 2 letters, spells shears. Spells shear. What's a shear? A shepherd uses a shear to trim the hair on a ram. And supposedly one of his solo albums, I haven't researched so much on Paul McCartney after leaving the Beatles. I wasn't that much into his stuff. I should get more into it after reading this. But anyway, or the new Paul McCartney. Some people call him Fall McCartney. Some people call him other names, because if you notice, a lot of people noticed from '66, the last Revolver album that the real Paul McCartney was on, and supposedly the new Paul McCartney. The new Paul McCartney's face was long. The old Paul McCartney's face was very round, kind of like a Charlie Brown almost. Also, I haven't got fully into the bass part because Paul McCartney played the bass left-handed. This guy apparently learned how to play left-handed. He was also a drummer. He played some other brass instruments. He arranged orchestra stuff. He was much more amazing musician, but he wasn't really famous than Paul McCartney was, which is why he was able to take, according to this author, the Beatles into a totally new revolution with the album right after supposedly the real Paul McCartney died, which is the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And the reason they call it Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and on the cover, he gives about 100 different reasons why the cover was exactly the way it was. It was actually supposed to be a funeral for Paul McCartney, and there's messages in there. If you take a mirror and you put a mirror up to the album at a certain part of the drum head, I haven't done it yet, it's supposed to give you the date exactly when he died, which in the British way of writing dates, it says 11/9/1966, but it also some people thought that was November 9th, but it's not. In the British, it's 9/11, just like the false flag operation date. Okay, and he ties a lot of the stuff that's going on in America with what was going on with the Beatles. The MK Ultra was using the Beatles to promote LSD, and it's really very interesting. Let me see if I... Okay, so on the cover, supposedly when you put a mirror there, I haven't done it yet, and I don't have the album. I have to go print it out, and then I have to do it with the mirror and everything. He said you can do it with the CD case now, with an actual CD that reflects, because their CD reflects, but that wasn't... You had to do it with a mirror back in the days. And I guess you put it halfway through the drum, and then it makes it says I, or 1 in Roman noodles, 1, IX, which is 9. The I1 is 11. One of them spelled out 1, and one of them's the Roman numeral 1. And then it says he, and it has a pointer, and it points right to the new Paul McCartney. Die. So he dies. And also, he says this message was also in 1 and 1 and 1 is 3. Got to be good looking because he's so hard to see. So almost all these lyrics relate to the fact that Paul McCartney is not Paul McCartney, and you have to be really good looking to notice. His face is much longer. And why does he say 1 and 1 and 1 is 3? That's John Lennon's lyrics. And I forget the name of the song. 1 and 1 and 1 is 3. Got to be good looking. It's so hard to see. Come together. Come together. Okay, I couldn't think of the name. But anyways, in Come Together, he's saying 1 and 1 and 1 is 3. What that means is there's only really 3 Beatles. And this other guy, who was the almost look-alike, much more talented, much better songwriter, but wasn't yet famous until he became part of the Beatles. And he also made his other acts that he was doing at the same time become more famous because he had a lot more money to put into them after he was inherited much of the wealth of Paul McCartney. So he says the reason why they did this is because at this time, I mean, if you look at the Beatles, they were so handled by their handlers, and the British invasion was used to really push a lot of stuff around the world with the Beatles' fame, against really them knowing about what was being done most of the time. This new guy who came in, Billy Shears or Billy Shepherd or Willie, Slick Willie, whatever you want to call him, but that's not his. Those are all of his stage names. Who became the new Paul McCartney? He was much more organized in working with the band to create really what they needed to create. But he was never into the drugs as much as the other ones. So he kind of helped them get out of the drug scene because he knew that they were being controlled by dark forces to promote Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco as a place where the CIA used the funneling of these drugs tried to control the teenagers. And they also hired a convict, Manson, which they haven't yet got into that on this book. I think it goes into this because it goes a lot into these dark secrets that whether this story is actually true or not. He says, I write it as a novel. And he says, the reason I write it as a novel, because I haven't died yet, and it can't be fully revealed until I die, the current Paul McCartney. But he says some things here, which I'll just try to find the quotes that I underlined that are really good. Okay, he says, all of the enormous negative consequences for me breaking the non-disclosure agreement are worse than ridiculous. Without going into it, there is no way I would possibly break that agreement. That is exactly why I am cautious to preserve the novel status of this revealing book. In fiction, such as a song, poem, and novel, I can say anything. That does not violate the agreement. But in straight communications, such as in an interview or on a witness stand, I am obliged to be silent about having any knowledge of Paul's death. So he says the reason he wrote this as a novel is because he's under a disclosure agreement when he joined the band, that he can't disclose all this agreement. So basically, Paul according to the point of view of this book, Paul believed he was going to die, so he found a replacement. And he believed that when he died, because he was having all these prophetic dreams, that he would be able to channel to this new writer and still be part of the band and still have his legacy go on, and his family go on. So that's why he didn't want anybody to know he was going to die. But he didn't know exactly how he was going to die, but he had all these messages that were happening. And according to the chapter where he actually dies on September 11th, he was leaving the studio, and I guess John Lennon was doing a movie. This is 66 September, a movie in France, I think it was. So only Paul McCartney and one other Beatles were in the studio, and this was right after they finished the Revolver tour. And he says, okay, we're going to make a new CD, our new album at the time, and we're going to just bam, bam, bam. I need you to do 10 songs. I need John to do 10 songs. But John Lennon and Paul McCartney always wrote together, but this time the producer was saying, no, you're going to write your songs, and John's going to write his songs. He's in another country right now doing this play. So you're going to start by yourself, because they've always were a double team, and he was kind of frustrated by this. I've never written songs by myself. So he stormed out of the place, he slammed the door, and he left. And that was the night supposedly he died. I believe that's going from memory, so I'm going to have to go back and reread it again. But anyway, on this night, supposedly he picked up a hitchhiker who was really hot. And as a Beatles, he couldn't really go out on the street and meet girls because he would get mauled by people. All the Beatles would at that time, 66, because of the Beatlemania. So, but he picked up this really hot hitchhiker, supposedly, who was going to wherever he was. She was going far away from her hometown area. But he kept checking her out the whole time, and she kept going, "You're really the Beatles guy?" So she was searching through the radio dials trying to find a Beatles song. So she says, sing, because she was still kind of like blown away that, wait a second, a Beatles is picking me up as a hitchhiker on the street. It was unbelievable to her, too. Well, this is all from piecing back what possibly happened, because no one knows exactly what happened, because they both were found dead. Supposedly he went through a red light and a truck crashed into him because they believe because he was checking out this girl the whole time, and he was distracted by this hot girl in his car. So when they wrote the song, what's the song about? Oh, Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins. That song, actually, hidden message of that song, I'll try to go into all the songs that have hidden messages. Almost every song after that had hidden message about the death. That song, supposedly, she's having fun. She's going away to have fun because this daughter from a nice family was leaving hitchhiking to go somewhere else because she was going to go have fun. But she left home because she never came back. She died. And they found out, they died September 11th, but they didn't verify the death of the body until after midnight of the next day, the September 11th, September 12th. And so 5 o'clock at that time, what the song says, is when they actually contacted that family of the daughter who died. They identified her as the dead person. So there's some other messages in that song about the death. And every other song and every other album after that really goes into this. It's really a lot of information, so I can't really remember it all in one reading, so I'm going to have to go back and forth making videos on this. But I'm going to try to just look at some of the things I've underlined. See if there's anything I want to say about it. God, there's just so much. Okay, Lovely Rita Mita made also has a lot of references to this scene. I also found some encodings in this that the guy didn't find, which I think are really beautiful too. They make secret messages going down the page that you don't normally see unless you highlight them. Okay, I can't find all my notes. That's an area. So he says, Drive My Car has a bunch of secret references to this. What other ones? He has a Masonic checkmate picture that John drew, and he bought this from John Lennon. Can you see it? Here we go. You can see this one. He bought this version of it for an illegally grown plant. He doesn't say what it is. I'm assuming it's marijuana. And a pie that he was going to give to John anyway. But John drew this hanging out at his house one day. Hanging out at actually Paul's house, which this guy moved into Paul's house. He was in collusion with the family. Paul McCartney's brother became his good friend and helped him out getting used to being the new Paul McCartney. So in this, it has a lot of references to a lot of the songs and what they actually mean. But it shows the four bandmates playing a bass guitar, which is the left guitar bass string. There's also some other bass strings on the album. I guess it's on the album cover. Probably Sgt. Pepper, where the fourth one of the strings is broken. That's to show that also that the fourth member of the band is gone. So in this, there's love. And on one of the albums, and I forget which one it is now, they're all trying to spell love. I guess they're spelling love with their hands or something like that, or they're doing hand signals. But Paul McCartney is supposed to do the O, but he's turned around doing it. And I guess that's this picture. Supposedly, I have to reread this all because there's so much facts drilled into my brain. But there's so much symbolism to the Masonic. This guy, apparently, his uncle, the reason he got into the Beatles and they found him is because his uncle was high up in the Masonic order, and he was also a little lower level Masonic person. So, of course, the Masons wanted to be part of controlling the Beatles, too, and keeping them in control, because there was a big risk that if Paul McCartney died, that they would be either break up or their fame would be lost, because sometimes you lose one member of a band, the fame goes down the hill. So there was many, many, many reasons for not making it public, although they made so many references to it in all their albums after that, and we'll get more into that in future videos. I think that's all about I can remember right now. I'm going to just look through some of the chapters here, envisioning. Okay, so one of the chapters called Playing with the Bonzos was one of his bands before he got picked up. I was a session musician, so he was a really good session musician. He was much more talented musician than most of the Beatles were at the time, and he really took their music to a higher level. Let's see. The one and only Billy Shear rams on. Okay, I don't want to get into that chapter yet. I'm going to talk about that later because there's so much to talk about. So, on one of the benefit of Mr. Kite, being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, it says late of Pablo, and late of Pablo means the late Paul, the dead Paul. Before Pepper's, okay, it talks about the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album was the first album they actually put the lyrics in an album. It was never, no other band ever put lyrics in an album until Sgt. Pepper's, and then everyone else copied after that. They actually put it, I believe, on the cover. And so he says, the reason we are doing that is to put our pictures behind the lyrics, means we stand behind the lyrics, but we overdubbed the words we really wanted to use. So if you read the lyrics, you can't hear the other overdubbing sound, but if you know what he really was saying and you listen again, you'll hear many words that they didn't say. So it says nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. If you listen to that again and you know it says the House of Paul. So it's a reference to nobody was really sure if this guy, Billy Shears, was from the House of Lords, was from the House of Paul, because they said Paul. They also, in Fixing the Hole, the whole message in Fixing the Hole was fixing the hole of the guy who died, which was Paul McCartney. And in it he says, silly people standing there, disagree and never win, wonder why they don't get past my door. But if you listen to it again, he says silly Beatles. So they overdubbed people and Beatles together. So one ear you'll hear a little Beatles and one ear you'll hear a little. But if you read the lyrics, that's why they put the lyrics there. So you're confused in what you really heard, because you're always going to believe what you actually read, not what you actually heard. That's a subconscious programming, but they at least were programming you to know the truth, so when it finally does get out, you wouldn't be so shocked. So there's so many other messages in all these songs. Okay, so he blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. They say that's a reference to the fact that he ran a red light and he blew his mind out because a car hit him and he actually got decapitated. The only way they can identify him was they knew the car license plate because he was so just totally destroyed, and the car actually caught on fire, so he was burned too, but he got decapitated. And one other thing is the real Paul McCartney was actually getting almost bald, and he would always put his hair down forward so you couldn't see that. But the new Paul McCartney wasn't. So that's just one of many things. You can tell it's not the same guy according to this author. And I'm not yet taking a point of view on which is right, but there's so much revealing stuff in this book that it's kind of hard to... Okay, so on one of the other albums it says OPD, which just like in the US it's DOA, dead on arrival. They have to actually pronounce someone dead, and they call it officially pronounced dead, OPD. And I guess that's written somewhere on one of the drum heads or something on the Sgt. Pepper inside or outside. But the OPD, officially pronounced dead, is also another secret encoding, which we'll try to find it here. What was it? There's so many. Okay, I'm going to have to come back. I'm going to make more notes here, and I'm going to write more stuff. Come back with another video, and I'm going to try to print out some stuff of all this albums that they're talking about and all the lyrics. I got it all down. But anyway, I just wanted to recommend this book. If you're into conspiracy theories, this is a really cool one. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it sure seems pretty freaking amazing if it isn't true. Okay, I'll be back with you at this. Billy's back. Okay, read the book. Okay, I just finished the video, but right after I finished, it's funny when you turn off the camera, you always remember things you wanted to say before you turn off the camera, so I'm going to just say them now. So one of the other chapters is Paul's Girls. So apparently Paul McCartney, before dying, got two different people pregnant. One was a girl from Germany, Erika Hubers, and another one was the girl who had the daughter named Michelle. I forget her name now, but anyway. So the song Michelle My Belle was after the girl Michelle, who was his daughter, turned 5 years old. The mother, who hadn't really been talking to Paul McCartney for 5 years because he got her pregnant way back at the beginning of the Beatles' time when they were on tour, and he didn't really want anything to do with her. He was too busy with work, and he wasn't really in love with her. So he just got her pregnant accidentally. But anyway, she sent a picture of his daughter at 5 years old. So that's when he wrote the song Michelle My Belle. And that's why he put Soleillement, or I forget what the words are in French, because this was a French girl and she would understand the meaning of the song. And he's admitting with that song My Belle, it's not a love song. That means it's my daughter, according to this author. And the weird thing is, they did a legal settlement to pay a certain amount of money to this daughter and also the other daughter of the other mother, the French mother. No, the other German mother. But one of the mothers, I can't remember which one, after Paul McCartney or the new Paul McCartney got super famous, the daughter, I guess, was grown up now and wanted, because her dad didn't want anything to do with her, but she didn't know that her dad was already dead a long, long time ago, so she thought the new Paul McCartney was her dad. So she was wanting to see him, but he didn't want anything to do with her because he said, "You're not my daughter." But she got really upset because he had already agreed settlement to pay alimony to her for many years, but since he wasn't now saying you're not my daughter, that made her say, okay, I want more money from you because you're refusing to accept me as your daughter, even though you already agreed a long time ago to pay alimony for me for my rest of my life. So, but at this time, the Paul McCartney's dead. She doesn't know that her dad's dead. But the writer of this book, supposedly Billy Shear, is the new father that is now the Paul McCartney you think's Paul McCartney, according to this book. And he says, in court, he says, I'll do a DNA test to prove I'm not your father. So they did the DNA test, and sure enough, it comes out, it can't be my daughter. But so why this guy supposedly they thought was the other Paul McCartney, how could he have different DNA if he already agreed that he was the father in the previous lawsuit before 1966, before the other Paul McCartney died? So this was totally confusing to them. But finally, the mother saw a picture of the court case where they took a picture of him when they did the DNA test, and she says, wait a second, that's an imposter. So he couldn't say, yes, I'm an imposter, because that would be going against his agreement in 1966 before Paul McCartney died, that he would take over his role if he does die, and there would be no word ever said about it unless it was said in, of course, a novel, which is, he's saying this is a novel, so you can say anything you want in a novel. He's not going to say it's true or not true. It's up to you to decide, and that's what I'm going to do too. So anyway, that was pretty interesting. So he said, they can say I'm an imposter, great. They can take me to court as many times as they want. I can have as many witnesses, because this mother said, so if you're saying this is not your daughter now, but you before agreed that it was, but it wasn't him, it was the other Paul, agreed it was, you're claiming that I had affairs with other people too while I was dating you. And everybody knew that she was a very clean, upright girl, and she never slept with anyone else but Paul McCartney during that 3-year affair or 2-year affair or whatever it was. So she brought on all these witnesses to the court saying they knew her very well. She never had another boyfriend. She never slept with another person during that time. So there's no way she could have got pregnant with anybody but him, not knowing that this new him wasn't him, or the guy who died in '66, according to the book. So he says, well, I can get just as many witnesses to tell, you're saying I'm an imposter, well, I can get as many witnesses as you can get witnesses that you're a clean girl, that I'm Paul McCartney, or at least the Paul McCartney that everyone thinks is Paul McCartney. He didn't go into that because he can't do that in court. He would be sued. And he also, he would risk his whole, he had basically moved into the Paul McCartney house. He had basically taken up all the money from his death settlement. Some of it was given to different family members to keep quiet, and other people to keep quiet. Were given a lot of, at that time, Paul McCartney was super rich at 66. He was only, the new Paul McCartney made much more money under the Paul McCartney's name, but he could never have made that money not being the Paul McCartney if he used his old name, which was Billy Shears, in this band that wasn't even famous. So anyway, he knows he owes it all to Paul McCartney, so he kept the name Paul McCartney and stayed in the family Paul McCartney a lot of the money, even though he's not really a McCartney. And he says he's not even a really Billy Shear, because that was also a stage name. So the funny thing is, there was another Billy Shear who 20 years before Sgt. Pepper was released, almost to the date, supposedly died and said he would be back in 20 years. And that's when this Billy Shears shows up as the one and only Billy Shears, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, on the CD. Some of the other things that are on the Sgt. Pepper's album cover, there's so many references to a dead person in a car crash, and you can find that for yourself. I'll try to go more into it because I haven't looked at the album cover since reading this book. I'm going to go into each piece because it gets really complicated. And there's all these, they use Masonic symbols because the Masonic use 2 symbols, and they show that in the one is the compass, and one is the what is it called? The right angle, which is a perfect right angle ruler. And so in the GM, in a lot of in the G is part of, there's always the compass and the right angle ruler. So they use those tools. If you map out from the heart of the new Paul McCartney, going from one side to another side of the record. There's a reference from one character that's in the death scene to another character that's in this funeral scene, and why they're connected together. You have to use all these Masonic symbols to know that. But anyway, what he says in this is basically, even if you don't figure it out by reading the songs, what the hidden messages are, your subconscious mind already knows, because just like you are attached already to the matrix field, everything you know, everything that's ever been known by anyone is already known by you. I'll give an example. I was studying coordinated, what's it called? Coordinated remote viewing, which is giving you just a coordinate, which is a number. So someone thinks of a coordinate, like could be the Eiffel Tower, the date it was built, and they think of the date, they think of the Eiffel Tower, they think of the scene. They don't even have to know much about it, because as soon as they think of the scene, your brain is already downloading all the information. And then they write a number, and they put that in an envelope, and they give it to another person. The person gives it to all this class, and they all this envelope, they look at it, they write down the number, and say the number was 2564. It doesn't really matter what the number is, because whoever wrote the number was thinking of the scene when they wrote the number, and in that number got encoded all the information of this scene, whatever it is. And they don't say what the scene is, and everyone does the remote viewing, and they all start coming up with a similar idea, and they finally all realize it's the same scene. But they get information that no one else knows, because you can actually see into the past and into the future in remote viewing. So what will happen is people write down this number. Say it's 5572. So you write down 5572, if that's the number in the envelope. Right when you stop it, you let your pen just let go and kind of let go of your muscles, and it'll kind of go out to the side. Usually it'll make a squiggle. I'm going off the camera. But it'll make a squiggle from the number off the page, because you just let your arm naturally go. And what's happened is all the information from that number encoded in that person's consciousness, you're picking up, is encoding in whatever this frequency of your line moving across will have all the information you need. This is how crazy the conscious mind works. And this was basically people working in the military industrial complex who did remote viewing to figure out why Russia had certain bombs and what kind of bombs they had and everything like that. And it was done in both countries. So later, after you've done that, you go into another scene where you put your pen on the line that you just drew, and you start closing your eyes, and you start doing these remote viewing sessions, and they go through all these different phases. It's a really long process, so I won't go into that. But just so you know, your pen flowing off the screen, which you're trying not to move your hand, but the force of the consciousness is moving your hand like the Ouija board would do, is basically encoding information in a squiggle of a pen. So if the pen squiggling can encode messages that will give you a picture of this scene that someone wrote on a number that they even thought about, if that can happen, if remote viewing is true, which I believe it is because I've studied it and I've done it, then imagine what someone who writes a song, who knows the secret message that you don't know, they write it, you listen to the song, and you might not know why this gives you some nostalgic feeling or something, because there's secret messages in it. But your subconscious mind knows everything that person knows who wrote the song. So that's why they don't need to tell you all the things they tell you. So he says, basically, this was known to the Masonic Order and all the other secret cabal government people. So it says, whenever one work makes allusion to another, the associative link works to connect us to the second work, even if we do not consciously understand it all. So in all the songs, there's references to not only the death scene, but there's also references to famous books, famous plays that talk about the same exact car crash scene. And even the people that they put on the cover of the album were related to, all the people in the front were all the dead people. And they have a waxwork of Paul McCartney to say that he was dead. And the whole old band was dead in waxworks. And the reason they used waxwork is because the song, or actually the book, they use a lot of references to Alice in Wonderland throughout all their writings after that time, and even before that time. So you got to go back and read the actual book, Alice in Wonderland, and not the movie, because the movie doesn't always give you all the true information that the book does. But anyways, in that in the book, if I can find the quote, I might leave it for another video because I can't find it right now, and I just lost my page because my dog ear, I removed it when I was here. I'm somewhere over here. I'll just leave this dog ear. I lost my place, my dog ear. Okay, anyway, we'll get back to it in the next one. But basically, you know, if you look at the album, you know all the subconscious meaning behind all the stuff, whether you really consciously know it. Your subconscious mind, which is your deep, true self that's all connected, knows everything. So that's why they can give you all this message, if he in fact really did die, slowly but surely, so you'll understand when you finally get the real story, if it is a real story. You won't be shocked because you already subconsciously know that it happened. Anyway, I'm just looking forward to reading to more and getting more into it. I'm going to go back and read the whole book and get more into the story and the real nitty-gritty on future videos, so stay tuned. Peace out. So I'm coming to you by postcard again. Hello everyone all around the world. I haven't shaved in about a month. I kind of just shaved around here a little and up around here when I went to school last week, teaching at the university I teach at, but I usually sing at weddings on the weekend, and this is the first month I haven't sang at any weddings. So, first month in 2 years, so anyway, I gotta make more videos. So like all my videos, watch all my videos because I need some more money. Okay, but anyway, the longer you watch, the more money I get, so please help me out here because I'm only getting about $50 to $100 a month now on my YouTube videos, but they keep going up. So it started at about $25 a month, and it's all the way up to $50. It's doubled in the last few months, so I keeps getting more and more people watching my videos, so that's cool. I love you guys all. So anyways, this is my third installment of the book that is so amazing. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but whether it's true or not, it's got amazing stuff in there that is true, whether the underlying premises of the whole book is true, or whether there's secret encodings in it, because there are a bunch of secret encodings in the book, which I'm finding more and more than even the so-called encoder that said he encoded the book have found. So you got to go check out the book. Anyway, it's called Billy's Back. It supposedly is excerpts from the memoirs of Billy Shear, and supposedly Billy Shear took over the part of Paul McCartney after Paul McCartney died on September 11th, 1966. So this is part 3. I'm just getting a little more into it, slowly but surely. I'm going to read the whole book again when I'm finished. I'm about more than halfway done with the book now. But anyway, Paul McCartney started having these visions, as I talked about in the previous ones, about dying for about a year or more. And he started telling everyone he's going to die, and he needs everyone to help him out to prepare for the switch to a new person, because he already found who he wanted to find. And while he was finding this person, his music started to become more imaginative and more creative, which is the one of his most, up until that time, 66, which was one of his most amazing songs, or on the last album before he died, which according to this book he died in 66, would be the Revolver. And the reason they called it the Revolver is he knew he was going to die, and he was revolving the band to, and he didn't know, he thought he was going to be die with a revolver, but that was actually prophetic, seeing the future of John dying by a revolver, because that's what he thought he was going to die by, but he ended up dying in a car accident. So here's what happened. He wrote the song, James Paul McCartney died in a church and was buried along with his name. He decided to change it before they put it in the Revolver to Eleanor Rigby, because they didn't want to put out this story before it actually happens. They weren't sure if it was going to happen. So they had actually recorded some recordings, and they were going to redub it over if he did die before the Revolver was released, which he thought he was going to die before the Revolver was released. And the song was going to be called Eleanor Rigby. No, it was going to be called James Paul McCartney, which is his legal name. James Paul McCartney died in a church and was buried along with his name. And that was going to be the clue that he died, because they put so many clues in after he actually died in all the albums, and so many people did get him and some people didn't get him, and they've been arguing ever since. And even all of his Billy Shear as Paul McCartney, all of his solo albums also. Band on the Run talks about the whole episode from the time he died on, I think it was Thursday, September 11th of 66, Friday, Saturday to try to contact all the other Beatles members to tell about, we can't put this story out in the media that he died. We have to cover it up every way we can. So they actually paid for the guy who was going to write the story, which he came out in another song. I forget which song it is now. But Band on the Run, which he released when his solo after he left the Beatles, was all about the band being on the run. And so was the song She's Leaving Home. Friday morning, she is far away. It means she's already dead. She's up in heaven. But Saturday, and many other songs that say, this Wednesday papers never come. What song is that? I forget. Tuesday morning, we're wives without a suitcase. See how they run. That song was also about the band was running in circles trying to figure out how they can cover up the media from exposing that Paul McCartney died, how they could pay off all the reporters, how they could pay off the police officers and everyone who saw the death. The problem was they saw him, this guy who they thought was Paul McCartney, dead, but they could not, even his parents came to see it and said, I can't recognize that as my son. I don't even know that he owns a Aston Martin, because his parents didn't even know he had an Aston Martin, because at this time he was becoming so famous that he wasn't even talking to his parents that often. But he was telling his parents that he was going to die, and he was telling his whole family, and his brother was in on this whole thing that he might die, and if he does, he requested that he switch it over to this lookalike, and he already found the lookalike, which was Billy Shear from the Peppercorns. He was Sergeant Pepper of the Peppercorns. Okay, so every song after that almost has references to it. And even in The Walrus, later on, a next song after The Walrus, he says, I gave you the clue, the walrus was Paul. So if you look at a lot of the encoded messages, and he told everyone, oh, I'm just writing nonsense lyrics. I am he as you are me, and we are all together, was not only a reference to Jesus Christ and to all the other prophets that John Lennon thought was a joke, that you should singing Hare Krishna, because he thought all the Hare Krishna, he went to go see the Hare Krishna guys, the founders of Hare Krishna or whatever they were, and everyone called them gurus and stuff, and he said they're not gurus, they're just normal people, but every one of us are enlightened beings. So he knew that at the time. So singing Hare Krishna, he says in that, I am the walrus, and all these other bad things that people were doing in the name of following some guru, which he says, I am he as you are me, and we are all together in the walrus. What that means is, I am Paul, you are Paul, we are Paul. That was Paulism, became the religion of the Beatles after Paul died, because they really worshipped everything because of his prophecy. He knew that he was going to be shot by a revolver. That's what he thought. But actually, that was the prophecy he had for John Lennon, was going to be shot by a revolver. He was going to die in a car accident. So he had all these prophetic dreams during the recording of the Revolver and before the Revolver and during the Revolver tour. So they kept thinking, like, should we not put him on a plane? Because he said, I'm going to die in a plane. Okay, we're gonna send you on a boat. And he's like, okay, I'll go on the plane, whatever. I don't think I'm going to die on a plane. And then he said, no, I can't go on a he was going to go some other plane route. And he said, okay, we'll just send you by car and we'll send everyone else by plane. He was freaking out about everywhere because he kept having these dreams about he was going to die either in a plane, get shot, in a car, all these other things. So anyway, I'm just kind of getting little bits of what I remember from reading this, and it's kind of all in my head. So one of the reasons why they wrote the song, Baby You're a Rich Man, Baby You're a Rich Man Too. Paul McCartney, or the new Paul McCartney, wrote that part. It was a song, a separate song. And then John Lennon wrote a separate song, which was going to be called How Does It Feel to Be One of the Beautiful People? But then they ended up putting these two songs together, and the reason they did is they realized it was about the same memory they had from at the time when John Lennon was finally told on Friday that Paul died on Thursday, and he had a day to like contemplate. He was freaking out, he was crying, he was screaming, he was saying, it can't be true, you're lying to me. I want to see his car, I want to see his body. But they said no one could even identify his body. Even his dentist couldn't, because his whole head got decapitated. The car caught on fire. So his parents couldn't even identify his body. His dentist couldn't even identify his teeth. That's how fucked up he was. The girl that was in the car with him, which he picked up, who became, one of the songs was about this girl. She's Leaving Home was about her. because she was leaving home with a suitcase, but the suitcase never arrived, which is another song. Suitcase never, I forget what song that is. But anyways, also John Lennon's suitcase got stolen that weekend in the hotel he checked in that was full. He had to wait for a room. And they almost kicked him out of that room because he started screaming so much in the middle of the night, and he was just fighting and smashing things because they told him John Lennon or Paul McCartney died, and he didn't want to believe it. And he thought it was a practical joke on him because they were all joking with each other at the time, and everyone in the band was kind of like pissing each other off with practical jokes, and everyone was fighting over because they were touring. They just got back from touring on the Revolver, and they just went night after night off just touring all over the U.S. Actually, they did a couple concerts the same day in different cities, which was crazy. So they pushed themselves to the total limit, and they said they won't tour anymore. And then right after that, Paul McCartney dies. Right after he slams the door and leaves the studio because the producer said, we're going to do something more incredible on the next album. You're going to write 5 songs. John Lennon's going to write 5 songs. And if you guys do it together, end up doing it together, that's okay. But I'm going to push you guys to do it on your own this time. And Paul McCartney said, that's screw it. I've never written by myself. And he got pissed off and he slammed the door and he left. And that's when he died that day. So the other song... So this whole Eleanor Rigby, the reason why he changed it to Eleanor Rigby is because him and John, when they ditched school, when they were in school together, they would often go to this like courtyard where there was a bunch of graves in this church area. And one of the graves they saw was Eleanor Rigby, which they didn't know who the person was, but they just always remembered that name because it was remind them of death. So every time he thought of death, he actually started having dreams that he was Eleanor Rigby, which was kind of strange too. So anyway, let's see. I'm trying to piece this all together. There's so many things going on in my mind reading this book, but I'm going to get it more in the future ones because it's going to all make sense. Because there's so much. So anyways, they were after the next day after he cried and screamed, they finally met together and they finally hashed out a deal with this new Paul McCartney. And this new Paul McCartney was a lot more talented musically than the old Paul McCartney, and he was also a lot more musically talented than most of the other Beatles. So he pushed in the Sgt. Pepper, which he released after that, he was Sgt. Pepper. He was in the middle. And if you notice the old Beatles, which are on the side, which are waxworks, all the Beatles were about the same height. But in the new one, the peppercorn guy, otherwise known as Billy Shear, was taller than them, and on the back they have him turned around and to show that he is taller. That was a part of the message that he isn't the Paul McCartney that you think he is. Anyways, there was a bunch of other things you can guess by the whole album cover. The girl that was running away to France, that hitchhiked that he crashed with, and everyone thinks because she was so beautiful because they saw pictures after her, how beautiful she was, that maybe he was trying to flirt with her or whatever, and that's why he crashed, because he went through a red light. So that's that song about he didn't notice that the light was changed. The Day in the Life was that he actually ran a red light. It wasn't that he blew his mind out of the car because his head got decapitated. So that was what it was about. A bunch of things in that song are also about everything that happened after that with John Lennon and Paul McCartney and the old Paul McCartney. But anyway, this girl was going to, if you look at the Beatles on the flowers, which is on above the grave of Paul McCartney, because it's a funeral procession. They have all these previously dead people behind them, and then they have living people in the front, which is to show there's 2 actual realities that you don't know, because the other Paul McCartney on the side was actually the dead Paul McCartney, and it shows, you can see the difference. They purposely put them on that album together so you can see that they're 2 different people. His face was longer, his teeth are different, his nose is different. He has like me, detachable earlobes. The original Paul McCartney didn't have detachable earlobes. So if you see a side view of the 66 prior to 66 Paul McCartney and the after 66, you'll notice that their earlobes are different. You can't even do an operation to get that done. That's like impossible. They were actually going to try to operate and see if that was possible. So they sent the new Paul McCartney to do some operations on his teeth, get a lot of surgery to try to look as much like Paul McCartney as too, but they couldn't change his height. I was wondering why they didn't just say he had some kind of disease and he had to be in the hospital and he had to take some, which I've seen people even at his age, he was 20-something, have another growth spurt because they have to, based on some disease they have to take some, what are they called, hormones. So there's some kind of hormone treatment you can take, which you actually will. The side effect is you'll spurt in height. So they could have faked that one, but they didn't fake that. They didn't probably. Maybe that wasn't around at that time, but now that's something that people can do if they really want to get a disease that almost kills them, and then take hormones to. But that's the side effect. They spurt. They grow up even in their 20s or 30s. They can grow a few inches higher. But anyway, we all can grow inches higher in any age because there's no such thing as age. We're all 7 years old. We'll get into a different subject in another video. But this book starts to get into those kind of Illuminati ideas that are not Illuminati ideas. They're Druid ideas, and they're previously from the academies in the secret societies in Greece, which went to Rome and went all throughout Europe, creating the secret societies. So I was part of that academy. In my previous life, I was also one of the founders of the Rosicrucian and one of the main translators of the King James Bible. I didn't just say all of that, so if you thought I just said that, you just imagined that. So what I'm going to do is to go back to talking about what I'm talking about, because I just put that side note in there just to see if you guys were awake. Okay, so in this book, he goes into a lot of other things that are factual information that is so amazing that it's worth reading it, whether the actual story of Paul McCartney died is true or not. So if you're not yet willing to be, know, perceive, and receive the truth of what happened, you can still go and read the book, and you can still realize that there's so much in it that is amazingly pertinent to why you need to read it, because it talks about the whole creation of using the Beatles for other alternative motives. And luckily, this guy who became the new Paul McCartney realized that and had to break up the band. And because he was realizing it was starting to be used for all kinds of nefarious things like promoting LSD. And it became a big part of the MK Ultra program in California and other areas. And that's why when Timothy Leary was fired from his position as a professor at Harvard University for brain chemistry or brain psychology or whatever, he was the professor of Dr. Timothy Leary. Why he was then all of a sudden put up in big houses and stuff that he couldn't afford. And my dad actually, the guy whose body I took over at age 1 or 2's dad. I'm a walk-in, just like a few other walk-ins we'll talk about in another video, but I won't talk about it because we're not talking about walk-ins. Maybe this book will start talking about walk-ins, and I can start talking about walk-ins, because I don't want to get too off the subject. Let me drink a little water, because I start talking about things that I'm not supposed to be talking about on YouTube, I start needing to drink water. Okay, so we're not going to go into walk-ins. My body said no. Leave that for another day. Anyway, this guy who named the guy who I took over body, named him after Timothy Leary. So that father and that kid, before I came in, actually went to these Timothy Leary camps. He also took me to the Self-Realization Fellowship in Hollyweird. And that's part of the Druid cult too, that the reason they call Hollyweird or Hollywood, that's what the wizard's wand is. It's Hollywood, because the Druids took over the cult of America and now run it out of Hollywood, spinning reality as they please. So nothing is as it appears to be, and everything is as opposite of what it appears to be, and nothing is the opposite of what it appears to be. Beckham-X, nothing is the opposite of what it appears to be. Beckham-X, everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. So everything you thought was real, like all this bombing of other countries because they so-called had whatever the new lie is this month, whatever Hollywood could spin through the Druids that run it, who actually were breakaways from the academy and breakaways from all the other secret societies that came from the academy back before Socrates and in Socrates' time. Anyway, there's many secret societies even beyond that, probably from Atlantis, but I haven't fully gotten all the way into the Atlantis connection yet. So I'll get into that when I'm ready, when that downloads. But anyways, I think what I'm getting is Atlantis might be what a few now people are thinking it might be a lot older than we thought it was, and it might have actually been over 10,000 to 20,000 years. There was a crustal realignment. The crustal plate moved on the globe, and where it was in the center of the Atlantic Ocean, it slowly moved south and became ice, and that's what Antarctica is, and that's why they don't want us to go to Antarctica. It's not because the world's flat, which is one of the crazy theories out there. So you can't ever go to Antarctica. The reason they don't want you to go to Antarctica is because it has technology that they don't want anyone to know about, and they're studying it, and it's all under the ice because the Atlantis is under ice, and it was one of the most technologically advanced civilization working with off-planet beings from other parts of the solar system and outside of the solar system. Anyway, I'm going way off. But anyway, this book goes way off too, so I kind of like that. It goes digressions back and forth, so you're like, where are we going? But I like that kind of stuff. I used to be the king of digressions at Soka University of America. All the professors would say I can take whatever we're talking about and go off on a tangent and take the whole class with me if I so desired, just because I didn't want to talk about whatever was being talked about. But somehow some of the professors knew that that was actually part of the healing experience of Soka University, is to realize that everything's interconnected, nothing's disconnected. So there's nothing you can say off subject that isn't on subject, because everything's interrelated. That's why I am you and you are me and we are all together. Or actually, I am he as you are he and I am you, and it's all oneness. So chemistry and biology and astrophysics and pottery, underwater basket weaving, I don't think that even exists, but it's a joke. All of that is interrelated. So if you can't talk about underwater basket weaving in the middle of a science class, then you don't realize holistic thinking, because holistic thinking includes everything. So I can go off on many tangents, and I'm actually coming back to the main theme of the book. But anyway, I'm getting tired of talking, so I'm going to leave it for part 4, but that's my little bit about the book. You need to read it, Billy's Back. After I finish Billy's Back and reread it again, I'm going to kind of take apart the lyrics and tell you where each thing works. But almost every song was to try to tell you the truth, because they didn't want to be told that they were liars later on. And look at it. Who's going to be the last remaining Beatles? It's going to be the guy who's not even a Beatles. So John Lennon said the Fab Three and the other guy, jokingly, but he wasn't really jokingly, because the other guy was actually the new controller of the Fab Three that were left over. So in this first talk with John Lennon on Saturday, I just had a rememory. The Wednesday papers never come. So they paid this guy, and he shows up in another song, and I forget what song it is. Sailor Sam. They called him Sailor Sam. He was Samuel. He was the only person that got the whole story of Paul McCartney's death, and he was going to publish it in the papers. He was a reporter. But the producers of the Beatles said, "Listen, you have no evidence, and we're gonna file a libel suit, which will put you and your paper out of business if you don't cooperate. So what we're going to do is we're going to send you on a sailing trip anywhere in the world you want to go, on a yacht or wherever you want to go. We're going to pay for it all. We'll send you to the Bahamas, whatever you want to do." So this guy said, "Okay, cool. Pay for my whole trip." That's why they called him Sailor Sam. I think that's Band on the Run. No, I can't remember which one it was on. There was one other guy who was a detective who they also paid off, which also shows up in that same song that they say Sailor Sam. I can't remember which song. They're all blending into one song, because all of life is a song, and songs sing through me and sing through you, and they're all oneness. But anyway, I'll get back more on that later on. But anyways, he's at this on the Saturday. So the papers were going to come out next Wednesday, because he was fighting with this guy. He said, "You have no proof. Yes, that car that crashed looks a lot like Paul McCartney's car, but Paul McCartney is in Africa. He got tired of being on the trip. They just got back from their tour. He probably let someone borrow his car if that was his car. The girl who died in the car has no reference to, there's no one in the Beatles that knows her, and if you can find any connection," and they couldn't find a connection. So he said, "If you publish that he died, we're going to sue your paper and sue you for libel, and we're going to show you that the real McCartney is in Africa," because they were actually preparing this guy to go to Africa to do facial shifts of his face and other things to make him look more like the Paul McCartney, but he didn't really still look like the Paul McCartney completely. But anyway, so this guy said, "Okay, you pay for this trip wherever I want to sail around the world, and you pay for the yacht. Give me the yacht. They paid this guy off heavily not to produce the story, and he went along with it. And only the other detective that wasn't sure that he was not really dead said, "I want to see Paul McCartney." Paul McCartney's having a vacation. He's in Africa, and he said he doesn't want to talk to anybody because he just got back from the Revolver tour, and it was the hardest tour they've ever done. They've played more cities in 1 week than they've ever played in their life, except maybe when they first started before they became the Beatles, when they were playing in nightclubs in Hamburg, in like the Mizu-Shobai, which we call in Japan the red light district, in the slutty part of town where the hookers and stuff do live shows too, and the band's playing the same damn stage where they're doing stripper shows. Anyway, that was a whole... The funny thing is when they became famous, they became Pretty Boy, Clean Boys, because that's what the producer wanted them and said that would sell more. But they were actually all dressed in black, leather jackets. They were all never shaven. They were all looked like... They had big pompadours like all the rockabillys back then, and they were really... not love songs. They were doing a lot of other songs besides just love songs. But then they said, "Oh, this is going to sell love songs. We're going to get you clean cut, shave you, put you in a suit." And they're like, "What? That's nothing like the Beatles." But anyway, they finally decided, "Okay, you're going to give us millions of dollars too? Okay, I guess we're going to just do whatever the fuck you want." And they started doing a lot of things they didn't really want to do. And that's why this new Paul McCartney decided he was going to change the whole band. And he became the leader of the band. And he had a talk with John Lennon on the Saturday after the Friday he found out that his partner died. And he said, the first thing he said is, "I will do everything to make this band next album and the future albums better than any other album you've ever done, but what you have to do is give me full control of the band." And John Lennon's like, "What the fuck? You want full control of the band? We've never had a leader. Yes, some people think I'm the leader, but actually we're all a democratic system here." He says, "I'm not talking about totalitarianism. I'm talking about the musical direction to make it was the first theme album. All the other albums were just kind of a bunch of songs jumbled together. And this was the first album, the Sgt. Pepper, where actually the lyrics were printed on an album, which it never had happened in history. After that, everyone started putting their lyrics in the album or on the album. I had an old record where David Bowie hand wrote all the lyrics. I think it was Hunky Dory on the backside. You can almost read most of his writing. If I were to do that, my handwriting, you probably wouldn't be able to read it because my lyrics, I can't even read them half the time. But anyway, someday I'm going to publish all my I do have my physical drafts of all I usually write on the back of like junk mail and the back of old bills and banking statements and boxes of gifts pretty girls gave to me. They were prettier back when they gave them to me. But anyway, I wrote love songs on the little box they gave me with a stuffed animal or something. I can't remember. And some cologne. It smelled like cologne. Anyway, all that stuff's going to be out there in my next books because my 60-plus songs are now going international. And I'm releasing my 4th or 5th music video, which is going to be beyond anything you've ever saw in any of my previous music videos. So just stay tuned because I am the new Tim Giannakis too. I am the artist formerly known as Tim Harada, formerly known as Tim Van Kampen, formerly known as Tim Giannakis. One of my stage names is Bajat Fach, which is my future perfect self from the year 2424 after David Bowie. And one of my other stage names is Major Tim to Ground Control. Watch my radio show. Okay, that's enough deviating from what I was going to talk about in the book, and I'll deviate more in the next video. I love you all. Peace out. Okay, I'm back at you. This is, I think, the 4th video of this incredible book, Billy's Back. I just finally finished it. I'm going to read it again, but in the meantime, I sent off the money to buy the second book of it. The longest book is like $30. It's 600 pages. I didn't want to spend $30, so I spent 12 something on this plus shipping. And then I just bought the second one, which is called Beatles Enlightenment. These are 2 books that are part of the longer 600-page book that I didn't buy because it was like 30-something bucks. I didn't want to buy that right until I read everything else. But I think I'm going to probably buy that at the end, so I end up having to pay double. Even on the Kindle version, it's like 30-something bucks. So I don't know if I'll do that. I'll just buy the actual paperback. It's almost the same price. Anyway, I finished it. I have a lot to say. I don't know what I'll start because I have a client in about 15 minutes, so I have a little bit to say. But anyways, if you haven't read it yet, if you haven't figured out that Paul McCartney died In 1966, you need to get this book and figure it out. There's so many clues online too. There's so many videos and everything else. So if you don't understand it by now, this will help you. I didn't understand it until recently. I've been always into all different kind of conspiracy theories, but I never heard of this one. Even though I heard that Paul is dead, all those rumors and stuff like that, I didn't really catch on that it was actually every single one of the songs after that were pretty much about it. And every Beatles cover of every record after that pretty much was trying to say it too, because they all signed disclosure agreements and they couldn't say it in public, but they wanted to say it in song because they can say it in song because song can't be taking you into court to say you gave secrets away in a song because they encoded it in the songs. But anyway, I forget where I left off last time, but let's just go see back. Okay, so Hey Jude. Why did he write Hey Jude? I know he said in interviews he wrote it to Julian Lennon, which was having a hard time because his dad wasn't around. And this new Paul McCartney, otherwise known as Billy Shears, he hung out and played with Julian Lennon more than his dad did. His dad was a really shitty dad, also a shitty husband. He started having an affair with, before he got divorced with his first wife, to hang out with Yoko, and then he left and finally married Yoko. But anyway, all you need is love. Yeah, that's all he needed is love, because he wasn't a good lover for anyone. He was a pretty shitty husband. And he writes about, I used to get mad at my woman. I beat her and kept her apart from the things she loved. That was true. He was that kind of a person. So it's funny because all these great writers about love and kind and compassion stuff, sometimes they are the opposite of that. So John Lennon wasn't the greatest guy, but he started to become greater as he got a little older and started to be more into helping the world and trying to save the planet and stuff like that before he got killed. But anyway, he wasn't always that good person in the beginning. Especially he wasn't nice to this guy, Billy Shears, during the time that he took over the band. So he wrote the song, let's see, what song we're going to talk about. There's so many songs. Oh yeah, he wrote the song Hey Jude. The reason why he said Hey Jude, Paul McCartney's real name was James Paul McCartney before he died in 1966, September 11th. He was saying, hey Jude. Jude is the brother of James in the Bible. So he was saying, I'm the brother of James. And of course, all the songs that most people wrote about men writing about men, they usually change it to women in the song because it sells more. People think it's a love song or it's about a woman. If even Bernie Taupin was writing about this song is your song, which is also in this book, to his hopeful lover, what is his name? Just went blank there. Sir Elton John. So Bernie Taupin wrote that song, Your Song. This is your song. And he wrote it for him to play it, but that was... people think he wrote it for a girl. Of course, at that point he wasn't out of the closet that he was gay, but all of the songs were... even gay guys wrote at the time songs. They didn't say it's about their lover guy. But a lot of these songs that they changed to girls were actually about guys. So it's just so they can make it sound like it's a love song. But Hey Jude was written actually to himself. He was the brother. He was claiming metaphorically to be the brother of James Paul McCartney. And that's what Jude is. Jude is the brother of James in the Bible. Okay. So he says, let her into your heart. Let her into your heart was really him. Was really let James Paul McCartney into your heart. Let him under your skin. They were doing injections in his face to make him look more like James Paul McCartney. So everything about that song was actually written to himself. And he's saying let her. It's not. It's him, James Paul McCartney. But people always do that in songs when they're guys. I've done that too. I've written songs for other people and I didn't want to know it's about them, so I changed the words. Like, actually one girl asked me to change the words because I wrote a song about her and I changed it to no, oh, that was the old word. You almost heard it. I changed it to, what did I change it to? Sachi Says. Her name wasn't Sachi. She had another Indian name, but she didn't like her name being the title of a song, so I changed it to Sachi Says. Also, I wrote a song called "We Don't Really Give a Damn About Your Bullshit." I was actually originally wrote that to my wife, just the chorus part, because I was pissed off at her one night, and I was like, "I don't really care about your bullshit." I made a song out of it. But then, of course, that's kind of a cruel song to write to your wife, so I changed it. "We don't give a shit about your bullshit," and I made it about all this other stuff going on. If you can kind of figure it out, it's going to be released real soon on my new CD. Anyway, we always change lyrics when we're getting ready to present them to the whole world because we don't want a lot of the private stuff out there. So I've changed names to songs. I've changed things that I wrote for guys. I made it girls, of course, because it wasn't a love song, but I made it to sound like a love song because they'll sell better. Oh, whoops! I gotta take a call here. I'm back at you guys. Last night someone called me right in the middle of my fourth part of this, so this is the fifth part, continuation of the fourth part, and I forgot where I left off last night. Anyway, I didn't have time to redo the video, so I'm just going to leave that how it was with my client calling in the middle, 10 minutes early from the session. I just started going through the book. I just started, so it's going to take me all day, but it's a constant, every other word, you circle the first letter and it makes this whole story. So just going down the page, reading from the beginning, it says, Billy's back. And the memoirs of Billy Shears. That's just the introduction. And then I started doing that on the next section, and it's going to take a long time to do it because sometimes it skips a little bit. It says, at first, you, and this is going just down sideways, you may say Paul is a dreamer, but he is not the only one. The only one from the time. That's as far as I got. And then I found the word swine. So I think the time in, I don't know how swine. I skipped 2 letters to get swine, so I don't know if swine is really in there. Anyway, I'm going to go through all that and tell you what the side message says, because it's in a constant encoding all the way down the whole book. So what was I talking about when I got cut off the other night? Let me try to remember. Hey Jude. Okay, so Jude is the brother of James, and James Paul McCartney is the guy who died. So he's saying I'm Jude, and letting him under my skin is, he said he was like channeling Paul McCartney after he died when he was playing his bass in his house, because it was so hard for him to play the bass left-handed because he's not left-handed, but he kept at it, and one night he felt like this kind of like channeling, like all of a sudden he was able to start playing the bass. It was miraculous because he thought it would take many more months to learn how to play the bass. He still, till this day, sometimes picks up the bass wrong or the guitar wrong, the opposite way. And he says that's actually one of the movies. I can't remember which movie it is, either Yellow Submarine or the movie Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It's also, he actually picks up the instrument, whatever instrument he was playing in the movie, backwards. And then he realizes it and changes it to the left hand because he forgets he's supposed to be left-handed. A lot of other things he did is, I guess it's the right eye. Somehow when Paul McCartney sings, or the old Paul McCartney, he'd always raise this right eye a little more, and John Lennon kept saying, you got to work on that, keep working on it. And he said it would get so sore, he would try to do his eye thing. Just, I don't know exactly how he does it. I got to go watch the movies to see exactly how he does it. What's also funny is one of the now Paul McCartney, which is really Billy Shepard or Billy Shears or Billy Campbell or William Campbell. We don't even know if that's really his name. That was all probably stage names too. One of the other stage names he used was Viv or Vivian something. And that Vivian guy was one of the stage names he used in one of the other bands called the Bonzos or something like that. It was a long dog something Bonzos. I can't remember the name. But he actually plays that part in the movie. I believe it's, which movie was it? I believe it's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So he plays the Paul McCartney role, and he plays his other role, which he was still doing on the side while he was doing the Paul McCartney role, but it wasn't, he never got famous as that role. What else does this talk? So after Hey Jude, so he wrote that as to himself, but he changed it to Get Under Her Skin. Most of the people who write songs, like even I do, I've written over 60 songs, and I'm now working on my 4th CD. I always change a lot of it just to kind of make it more sellable, and a lot of the personal stuff I kind of change it so it's not so personal. But I keep the original lyrics I wrote from my own memory, and when I eventually publish a book about what all my songs mean, which is hopefully soon, I'll kind of go into what the original meaning of the song was until I decided to release it to the public and make it a little bit different, which is what the Beatles did a lot of their songs. Like, James Paul McCartney died in a church and was buried along with his name. That was written by the first Paul McCartney. That was his original lyrics, and he changed it to Eleanor Rigby. Also, the part where it says, Father McCartney died in his socks in the night when there's nobody there. That was the original lyrics. Of course, he couldn't put that out because that was before he died, and people would be like, what are you talking about? You're dead. He didn't want to write, but that's originally he wrote it about. He just changed it to Eleanor Rigby and changed the character from his dad to some fictitious name. Who was it? Father Mackenzie, which is just sounds like Father McCartney, which was his dad. And actually, the new Paul McCartney, he moved into the old Paul McCartney's house, and even after his son died, he would come over occasionally and say, "Could I fix your socks?" And he's like, "No, I don't need anyone to fix my socks, but okay, go ahead. There's still some socks there from your son, and I know that has sentimental value to you to do that." So he did. He fixed his socks in the night when there's no one there. What else? Okay, so Hey Jude, that's Hey Jude. There's so many other songs. Every single song after and all the record covers had so much to do with every one of these things in this chapter. And I'm not going to remember it all right now. Oh, good morning. Good morning has a double meaning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Morning also is spelled M-O-U-R-I-N-G. Good morning, because this guy died, and there's nothing we can do to change his life. Call his wife in. They would just added the wife part in, but that was really about Paul McCartney dying, and there's nothing we can do about it. So let's have a good morning, because they're all mourning. The whole band was mourning. So that whole song is also about the death of Paul McCartney. Almost every song after that they wrote had something to do with... So they went from writing silly love songs, which is kind of funny, because the new Paul McCartney said, I don't want to join this band if you guys are going to keep writing all these silly love songs. And then after he left and started the Wings, John Lennon was actually in an interview and said, Paul McCartney, all he's doing nowadays is writing silly love songs, which was kind of funny because that's exactly what this new Paul McCartney, which is actually Billy Shears, said to John Lennon, I don't want to be in the band, and I'm not going to agree to be in the band if you guys keep writing these silly love songs, because he was just tired of that holy silly love song. So their songs after that were totally about, they occasionally sounded like they were about love, but they weren't really. They were about death, and they were about dying, and they were about resurrecting, and all the other things that they believed Paul went through. They started a whole religion called Paulism, which he cut out of this book, so I ordered the Beatles' Enlightenment, which we'll talk a lot more about that, and I'll get to that when I get to that. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on, brah. That also was, there was a lot of messages about what was going on in the band at the time after Paul's death. So Desmond and Molly Jones, the new Paul McCartney wrote these lyrics, otherwise known as Billy Shear or Billy Campbell. And he was thinking as Desmond was Paul McCartney, the first Paul McCartney. He was Molly, the guy who was trying to singer in a band, which was Molly. That was him, the new Paul McCartney. So you think it's two lovers being married, but actually it's not. It's about him becoming the Desmond. But so one day John Lennon was joking with him, and he says, oh, so you're Desmond. And he says, no, I'm not Desmond, I'm Molly. And he says, oh, okay, you're Molly. But they said a lot of his songs, like this song, sounded like Desi Arnaz, who was Ricky Ricardo during that time. I Love Lucy. Babaloo! Babaloo Ricky. So they kind of joked about him, and many times they would call him, what would they say? Boogaloo. Boogaloo music. He makes Boogaloo music. So in this song, Desmond and Molly Jones, that was a lot about what was going on in the band at the time, about this whole concept of them coming together. Let's see. So much more in this book. I'm going through. I'm going to read it a second time. I just ordered the... okay, Japanese Jailbird is a great chapter because He got arrested because he stupidly put too much marijuana in his suitcase. He shouldn't have put any marijuana, because they actually asked him, because he had a few arrests in other countries with marijuana. Before he came into Japan, this is when he went solo, the new Paul McCartney, otherwise known as William Campbell, Billy Shear, Billy Shepherd, all those names are synonymous, was asked by the Japanese police, if you come in our country, don't bring any marijuana. He was actually told that before he came, and then he was stupid enough. Some side of him probably wanted to rebel against that authoritarian system, and so he stuck way too much marijuana in his suitcase. And they actually showed him the video of the guy in the airport who checked his bags and found the marijuana, and the guy was like so embarrassed that he was finding, he thought it was Paul McCartney. It was not really Paul McCartney, but everyone in the world thought it was Paul McCartney. This was 4 years of him playing the act of Paul McCartney. This officer kind of wanted to like just forget that he even saw it and put it back in there, but he was realizing he's on video too, so he's like, oh, shit, I guess I got to turn him in. And he doesn't want to. This guy was probably a big fan of the Beatles and probably was a fan of Paul McCartney, but he has to bust him, the airport guy. So when they go to the police station and everything, and they're interrogating him, they ask him all these questions about his former days, the old Paul McCartney, which he doesn't have any recollection exactly, but he probably was told a lot about what happened to the old Paul McCartney for these arrests that he had. So back in Germany, before he was actually famous in the Beatles, they were even called some other band name, I can't remember the name. He got arrested for arson. But he also got another arrest for arson, which this new Paul McCartney didn't actually know of, and some other arrests that he didn't know about either. And so they were interrogating him, and they're like, I'm asking you all these questions, but you don't really know the answers. He's like, well, that was a long time. I can't really remember. I mean, I think I burned some letter of some girl, which was actually his girlfriend that he had a baby with, which is named Michelle. That's why he wrote the song. The old Paul McCartney wrote the song, Michelle, my belle. Exactly when she turned 5 years old, the mother, his ex-girlfriend, sent him a picture. This is your daughter. She's 5 years old now. And so he wanted to write that song, Michelle, my belle, to say, yeah, this is my daughter, but I don't want to be a father right now. So he ended up paying alimony to her, but not as much as the daughter wanted later on when she became older, and she wanted her father to recognize her as her son, and the new father said, I'm not your father. So she took him to court to sue him for not recognizing him, even though the old Paul McCartney did recognize her as the daughter and paid secret alimony to hush money to his previous girlfriend, who was the mother of Michelle McCartney, who's I think a bass player now in Los Angeles. So anyways, so they went to court, and he says, I'm not the father. So you can take a blood test if you want. You can take a DNA test. So they did that, and they found out, yeah, he's definitely not the father. So this has really puzzled a lot of people, because the first Paul McCartney said he was, and he paid hush money support for this daughter that now this new Paul McCartney is saying, but they didn't know it was two different people. But they actually took pictures after the DNA test, and they sent it to the ex-girlfriend, who's the mother of Michelle McCartney, Michelle, my belle. And she says, wait a second, that's not Paul McCartney, that's an impersonator. So she wanted to take him to court for impersonating Paul McCartney, and he's saying, so this former girlfriend brought a bunch of witnesses to say, okay, you're saying this isn't my daughter, or this isn't your daughter, but I have tons of witnesses that would say that I never dated anyone during this period of time that I dated Paul McCartney, so I couldn't have possibly got pregnant with anyone else. I was a super good girl. I never slept around with anyone, and I have all these witnesses of people that would say that. He says, you can bring all the witnesses you want, because I'll bring all the witnesses for the last 10 years to prove that I'm Paul McCartney. So he couldn't say that I'm not Paul McCartney, because he's been playing the role by that time he was playing the role for over 10 years, longer than the real Paul McCartney played the role in the Beatles as Paul McCartney. So he can say, I can just bring as much witnesses as you can bring that says you're a clean girl and you didn't sleep around during the time you were sleeping with Paul McCartney. I can bring just as many witnesses that'll tell you that I'm Paul McCartney, because these people know me for the last 10 years as Paul McCartney. So it was a total mix-up. They couldn't really figure out, was he an impersonator or was he not? And they couldn't prove he wasn't or he was. So it was really funny. But then when he's in this police station in Japan and he's getting interrogated and he can't answer the questions right about this old Paul McCartney, but these interrogators know they're trying to entrap him because they know his fingerprints don't match either. So the fingerprints on his suitcase and everything don't match the police records of his fingerprints when he was the old Paul McCartney who got busted for arson. So they're saying, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm Paul McCartney." They're like, "No, you're not. You're an impersonator, and we're going to arrest you for impersonation. You're here touring Japan as Paul McCartney, and you're not even Paul McCartney." He says, "Yes, I'm Paul McCartney." He says, "How come your fingerprints don't match the original Paul McCartney?" And he says, "Well, I don't know, but I'm Paul McCartney, and I can bring many witnesses to tell you I'm Paul McCartney. I've been touring as Paul McCartney. I've been in the Beatles for all these years as Paul McCartney. This is the new Paul McCartney. He's not really Paul McCartney." But the British government is in on this because EMI is part of the Illuminati, which we'll get later into more, hopefully. And then I'm going to have to read more on this. But he just starts touching on the Illuminati at the end of this book, but he doesn't really get into it because a lot of the chapters that were in the 600-page book, this is only, I don't even know how many pages because there's no page numbers. I would guess this book is about 200-something pages. And the next book that I ordered, which talks all about the philosophy of the Beatles and the whole religion of Paulism and the Illuminati's maybe religion a little bit, is about probably the same, about 200-something pages. But the actual memoirs of Billy Shear, that these are two books, excerpts from that book, is about 600 pages. So I'm probably going to order that one later. It's like 30-something bucks. Even the Kindle version is 30-something dollars. So I don't want to pay that much money yet. Although I should, because this book is so good, I know I'm going to order it anyway. I'll read the Enlightenment one. But the dark chapters about the Illuminati and about devil worship and about secret murders is the one you're going to have to read if you read the actual 600-page book, because it's not in this book. They took out those chapters purposely. And in the Enlightenment book, it's not in that book either, because that book's about all their positive stuff. So I can't wait to read that. But he does get a little bit into the Illuminati, controlling EMI and controlling the whole New World Order message that they were trying to get the Beatles to help push. And the Beatles had one of the largest, with the new Paul McCartney, had the largest international television program when they did that, All You Need Is Love. And so anyways, I want to get back more on this. John Lennon said, all this new Paul McCartney is doing, he didn't say the new Paul McCartney, but all that Paul McCartney is doing since he left the Beatles is write silly love songs, which is exactly what that Paul McCartney said when he joined the Beatles. He doesn't want to write any more silly love songs. So as kind of a joke back to him, he says, some people try to fill the world with silly love songs. What's wrong with that? Please let me know, 'cause here I go. I love you. It was a joke back to John Lennon, because John Lennon was saying that all this guy's doing now since he left the Beatles is writing silly love songs, which is kind of funny because that's what John Lennon said. We have to keep writing silly love songs because that's what made the Beatles famous. And this new Paul McCartney says, no, we can still be famous. We can go off into a more enlightened music, and we can really change the whole music scene from these silly love songs. And they actually did that. So the first love song that they allowed on the Sgt. Pepper's was actually Something in the Way She Moves, because the agreement was between the new Paul McCartney and the new John Lennon not to write silly love songs. So when actually George Harrison wrote this Something, it was kind of a love song, they all loved it so much they were like, okay, I guess this isn't going against our promise not to write any more silly love songs, because it wasn't really it wasn't like, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was more deep and more meaningful, the new George Harrison's version of a love song. And all the other songs, they kind of put a love message in there somewhat, but it wasn't like the silly love songs that they were writing. And the silly love songs that the new Paul McCartney wrote afterwards, like, I love you. He purposely did that just to kind of make fun of John Lennon, saying we can't, all he's doing now is writing silly love songs. It was kind of a punch back at him. Anyway, they were constantly feuding after this, because also the whole band, the new Paul McCartney only did 4 years as Paul McCartney in the band, and then he broke up the band. And they were all like, you can't break up the band. You made a promise to be Paul McCartney. He says, I'm still Paul McCartney. They're like, what, you're going to take Paul McCartney's name and do it solo? What am I supposed to do? Tell people I'm not Paul McCartney and be my old character? And, you know, that's not going to work. You know, they know me as Paul McCartney. So he had this whole all the Beatles were kind of mad at him after that because he was now taking all the fame of Paul McCartney. But actually, by that time, he had already written 4 years of the best Beatles ever, released 4 or 5 records after that were so much better writing than the previous Paul McCartney, and his singing so much better, his bass playing so much better. He even got Ringo to drum so much better because he is a drummer. And the old Paul McCartney didn't even know how to read music. So the new Paul McCartney not only knew how to read music, he knew how to write full scores for orchestras. So he had orchestra pit stuff that he wrote, along with the producer writing a lot of the orchestra scores, but he actually wrote a lot of them too, which the old Paul McCartney couldn't even read music. So there's a major difference in his musical ability. If you look on this album, this back of the cover, it shows a palm. Palm is their sign of Paul McCartney, Palm. That's their one of their signs. So it's in a lot of the videos. They have hands and palms to kind of represent this whole message about the old Paul McCartney. Anyway, we'll get more into that as I read more about it. What do I want to end with? Okay, so many of the other bands also that they were in collaboration with during the time also wrote songs about Paul McCartney's dead. One of them was Bernie Taupin wrote the song, all the songs for not Billy Joel, I was going to say Billy Joel, Elton John. And a lot of those songs, that whole album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, is right after they told Bernie Taupin and Elton John that the story about Paul McCartney died in 1960. They were feeling in 1966. They didn't know that until, I don't know, whenever they told the story and they released that album. So that song, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, is a lot about their feeling of like, because they were also fooled by the new Paul McCartney until they were told, no, he's not really the Paul McCartney you know. And a lot of the songs that Bernie Taupin was writing and Elton John was singing or writing the music for and singing, they really looked at one of their biggest influence was Paul McCartney. But then to find out Paul McCartney isn't Paul McCartney and which one of them was more influential, it's kind of hard to say. But a lot of people thought that Elton John really copied a lot of Paul McCartney stuff. So did Billy Joel. Billy Joel's first few albums sound like the second Paul McCartney more than the first Paul McCartney. Hey Jude, for one, if you listen to a lot of the early Billy Joel stuff, I mean, it's almost, even his screaming at the end is the new Paul McCartney screaming, which the old Paul McCartney didn't do. Na 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 na, hey Jude, Judy, 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 wow. That whole thing that the new Paul McCartney did, which the old Paul McCartney never did. He didn't have that vocal ability. Billy Joel copied a lot of that stuff in his early few albums. Anyway, I'll get more into this. This is part 5. I'm going to read this again while I'm waiting for the Beatles Enlightenment to come in the mail because this book is so good. I got to get the second volume of it. Okay, love you guys all. Please subscribe down below and please comment and please share and all that good stuff, because eventually I'll be able to make a lot more videos and buy a lot more books if I have a lot more money. And the more you listen to my channel, the more money I get. Okay, so, and you can also donate. There's a donate button. I think it's up that way or that way. I don't know. Somewhere you can see donate button. Okay, I love you all. See you later, alligator.